It started with 3 mysterious packages in my garage and ended with a federal raid that exposed the biggest HOA scandal our town had ever seen. She fined us for mailbox colors and lawn heights, but behind her rules, Karen was running a black market empire right under our noses. I was just a regular guy until the FBI knocked on my door and asked me to help take down our HOA president. Let's begin story. The moment I opened the front door, the scorching Arizona wind slapped me in the face, but it wasn't the heat that made my breath hitch. It was the 3 anonymous cardboard boxes sitting dead center in my open carport like landmines. No labels, no markings, just sitting there like they were daring someone to touch them. And tucked beside my prickly pear cactus hedge, half hidden under a sad attempt at camouflage, was a white van with pitch black windows. It didn't belong to anyone in Sagebrush Glade. Inside, 2 men sat motionless, sunglasses on, no expressions, just a slow, subtle nod when they saw me. Before my brain could catch up, I heard it, that unmistakable sound that made my blood pressure spike. Flap, 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 flip-flops slapping cement like war drums. Then came the voice, shrill, nasal, and cutting through the dryer like a buzzsaw. Dusty, Muffin did a number on the driveway again. Oh, Karen's voice carried like a siren. And there she was, storming out of her front door, her rat-sized dog nipping at her ankles, dragging a neon pink leash behind her like a streamer from hell. Her beady eyes locked on the boxes immediately. I could almost hear her thoughts grinding together. I didn't even need to look at her to know the gears in her overbearing brain were turning. Karen was the kind of person who sniffed out business that wasn't hers like a bloodhound especially when it involved rules being broken on her street. I stood frozen, half shielded by the doorframe, watching her eyes narrow like a hawk spotting prey. My life, as I knew it, was about to explode. 2 days earlier, the men in the van, agents Marks and Howlett, had shown up at my door. They flashed badges so quickly I thought it was a prank, but it wasn't. It was federal. They needed my help with a sting operation. Someone had been stealing packages across the community, hundreds of dollars lost, security cams tampered with, and the thief, elusive, clever, and catchable. But they had a theory, and that theory had a name: Karen. They needed a house close to the sidewalk, visible, unprotected, a place that Karen had a history of policing. My house checked all those boxes. And apparently, my decade-long history of passive-aggressive battles with Karen over illegal bird feeders and non-regulation mailbox paint made me the perfect bait. I should have said no. But when they told me this could take down more than just a porch pirate, possibly an entire criminal ring, and that I might get to see Karen caught red-handed for once in her life, I was in. Now, standing there in the harsh glare of the sun, watching her pretend not to notice the van or the boxes as she snapped at Muffin to do your business already, I knew I'd crossed the line I couldn't uncross. I wasn't just a neighbor anymore. I was the inside man in a federal sting. And judging by the way Karen was already hovering near the edge of my property like a lion stalking a wounded gazelle, things were about to get real ugly, real fast. By the end of that first day, I had seen Karen walk past my house 6 times. That may not sound outrageous unless you know Karen. She never walks anywhere. She drives her golf cart 3 blocks just to yell at teenagers skateboarding near the community mailbox. But now, she was making full circuits around the cul-de-sac like a mall walker on caffeine. And each time, she found a new excuse to linger near my property. Once, she dropped her phone near my hibiscus bush and spent an entire 3 minutes searching for it while sneakily peering under my garage door. Another time, she loudly pretended to be on a phone call with the mayor complaining about crime in the suburbs, eyes locked on my packages like a hawk circling a wounded rabbit. I kept to the plan. I acted normal. I mowed the lawn, washed the truck, even swept the driveway twice, like a man possessed by cleanliness. All the while, hidden cameras mounted inside the garage, across the street on a fox bird feeder, and even tucked inside my neighbor's solar garden light captured every twitch of Karen's predatory interests. The van remained parked, silent, a ghost haunting the edge of my vision. The agents inside texted me updates in real time. She's sniffing around again, zooming in on her with the birdhouse cam, nosy as hell. She just tried to count how many steps from the sidewalk to your garage. This woman isn't real. It was surreal. Watching her circle like a shark made my skin crawl and my stomach twist. My whole body was tight with adrenaline. I wasn't built for espionage. I was a divorced accountant who grilled too much and watched old war documentaries. And yet here I was part of a federal sting targeting the same woman who once reported me for using a non-HOA approved garden gnome. Then came the moment that nearly blew everything. I had just stepped inside to grab a water when I heard the faintest metallic click. I froze, quiet as possible. I peeked through the blinds and my heart leapt into my throat. Karen was crouched beside my garage, not on the sidewalk, on my driveway. She had a crowbar in her hand, the kind you might use to open a stubborn paint can or force open a door latch. She was fiddling with the edge of the garage like she was unsealing the Ark of the Covenant. Her face was twisted with purpose. Muffin sat obediently nearby, tail wagging like they were playing a game. Then she saw it. The security camera mounted directly above the garage door, blinking red. She froze, eyes wide, body rigid. I could see the precise moment the reality hit her. She was being watched. For 5 full seconds, she didn't move. Then, in a frenzy, she grabbed Muffin, turned, and ran. Not a walk, a sprint. Her flip-flops slapped the pavement like gunfire as she dragged the bewildered dog behind her like a malfunctioning Roomba. Inside the van, Agent Marks texted me one word: spooked. But the game wasn't over. It had just begun. The next morning, everything was still to still. In Sagebrush Glade, the wind usually howled by 9 a.m., sandblasting your windows whether you liked it or not. But today, the sky hung low and gray, and the wind had vanished. The atmosphere felt like the pause before a punch. I stood on my porch with a cup of lukewarm coffee, watching Karen's shutters twitch. She hadn't come out yet. No flip-flops, no barking from Muffin, nothing. Then my phone buzzed. Agent Hale, we're going big. She's on the edge. One good push. An hour later, the van returned, this time not bothering to hide behind the cactus. They unloaded new boxes, flashier, larger, with designer brand labels and fake tracking stickers. One had a gold foil logo that practically screamed "Steal me." They were all decoys, of course, rigged with invisible die packs and tiny motion sensors. One was even weighted to mimic a flat-screen TV. To seal the deal, the agents left the garage door slightly higher than before, just enough to reveal the treasure inside like a dangling carrot. Then they left. I stood inside, chewing my lip, eyes locked on the garage cam feed on my phone. Time crawled. Minutes felt like hours. And then the rain came. It started, slow spits of water tapping the roof like nervous fingers, then a sudden downpour. Arizona rarely got rain, and when it did, it didn't last. But this time it was the perfect curtain, loud enough to muffle sound, thick enough to obscure vision. That's when I saw her. Karen darted across the street, hood up, trash bag in hand like some bargained-in cat burglar. She moved fast, hunched low, splashing through puddles. Muffin wasn't with her this time. She was alone. Focused, desperate. She dropped to her knees and slid beneath the garage door with the kind of grace only greed could fuel. The camera feed showed her stuffing each decoy package into the bag with trembling urgency. One by one, the TV, the designer purse, the laptop. Her fingers moved frantically, matting her hair to her face, her hoodie soaked through. I couldn't move. My breath caught in my throat. Then, screech. 2 black SUVs came barreling around the corner, tires slicing through the floodwater, red and blue lights flaring to life. Karen froze mid-grab, one hand inside the box, the other clutching the dripping trash bag. She dropped everything and threw up her hands like a kid caught stealing cookies. The agents poured out, guns drawn, barking commands over the storm. Karen's voice shrieked across the rain like a banshee. Wait, I thought they were abandoned. I was cleaning too. No one listened. Cuffs clamped down on her wrists. One agent flicked on a UV light. Her arms and hands lit up neon green, invisible dye now glowing like an accusation. From my window, I watched it all unfold, trembling, not just from adrenaline, but something deeper, satisfaction. Years of her pettiness, her complaints, her reign of control over this community ended in a single moment. But Agent Hale had said it best earlier in the day. We're not after just a porch pirate. And I knew then Karen's story was far from over. Karen's arrest was the talk of the cul-de-sac by sunset. And not just because of the spectacle, though that alone was something to behold. Half the neighborhood had come outside during the chaos. Phones were up, faces glued to windows, children peered through blinds. The HOA's self-appointed queen had been dragged away in soaking wet yoga pants, screaming about misunderstandings and community oversight. If I hadn't seen it myself, I'd have thought it was a sitcom. But the truth was darker, much darker. I didn't sleep that night. Too many questions were spinning in my head. What had Karen really been doing? Were we just scratching the surface? The next day, Agent Marks came to my door with answers and a thick manila folder that hit my kitchen table with a thud that echoed through my spine. First of all, he said, pulling off his sunglasses and rubbing his temples, "You did good, better than good, but this isn't just about a few packages anymore." He laid it out in brutal detail. The FBI had been tracking a theft ring operating across multiple Arizona suburbs, an operation that began with package thefts but ballooned into something far more elaborate. And right in the middle of it all was Karen. The FBI had been monitoring her online activity for months after an alert was triggered by her use of alias seller accounts linked to stolen goods, electronics, designer clothing, and even medical equipment. She moved them through online marketplaces, disguised as donations or estate sale finds. But here was the kicker. She wasn't just fencing stolen items, she had set up a fake charity, a website complete with stock images of smiling veterans and American flags, all under the name Desert Patriots Foundation. According to the site, they supplied gear and aid to homeless veterans across the Southwest. Except not a single item was ever delivered. Instead, every cent that flowed through that charity ended up in Karen's personal accounts. The money was used for spa treatments, imported furniture, and that garish Mediterranean-style fountain she had installed without board approval, the one that flooded her neighbor's lawn and got me a citation for excess water runoff. As Mark spoke, I just sat there, stunned. My hands were trembling around my coffee mug. This wasn't just Karen being Karen. This wasn't about petty power trips or lawn sign violations. This was organized crime. And this, Marks added grimly, pulling out a printed screenshot of an online seller dashboard, was just the storefront. What we found in her storage unit downtown makes this look like pocket change. I didn't know what to say. All I could manage was a whisper. "You're telling me she was running a black market? From her house?" He nodded. "From her house. From your HOA. Right under everyone's noses." I looked out the window, across the street to her now silent, Rain Street home. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't the end of the story. This was the beginning. By the time the sun rose over Sagebrush Glade the next morning, every front lawn had become a crime scene of gossip. Karen's arrest was now headline news across the state. The footage of her being cuffed in the rain had gone viral. Local news vans camped out near the community pool. A drone even buzzed overhead that afternoon, probably capturing footage for a suburban crime wave special on Channel 9. But inside the community, the real explosion hadn't even started. The whole board called an emergency meeting that evening. Flyers were duct taped to mailboxes, emails flooded our inboxes, and a robocall featuring the voice of Nancy, reigning HOA president, begged everyone to attend a critical discussion on community security and public relations. Translation: damage control. I went out of sheer curiosity. The community clubhouse was packed, buzzing with angry murmurs and pointed glares. Nancy stood at the front of the room behind a folding table like she was hosting a funeral. Tight bun, pearl necklace, stack of papers she clutched like a rosary. She looked like she hadn't slept. I noticed a few seats beside her were empty, former allies of Karen, maybe now too ashamed to show up. The meeting opened with Fox pleasantries, then descended into chaos almost immediately. "How long was she stealing?" someone shouted. "Why weren't we told there was a federal investigation?" Another yelled. "Is this why our playground fund disappeared?" Nancy tried to maintain order, slapping her gavel like it owed her money, but it was hopeless. The rage was real, and it had been building for years. Karen had made enemies of nearly everyone her, and now those people wanted answers. And then came the firebomb. A white-haired man from the Backmer, Delaney, who always wore socks with sandals and was rumored to be ex-Chaw, stood up and bellowed, "Karen stole my generator last winter and said it was improperly stored. I thought I was going crazy." Laughter, gasps, and shouts rippled through the room. Then, the fatal question. Is the HOA liable for enabling a federal criminal? That one hit Nancy like a punch to the throat. She turned scarlet. Her carefully rehearsed answers fell apart. She tried to pivot to neighborhood unity, but the crowd was already boiling. Then the door creaked open. Agent Marks entered, flashing his badge like a cold gust of wind. He stood calmly at the front, thanked everyone for their patience, and offered a few clear, chilling words. Let me be absolutely direct. Anyone who assisted, enabled, or financially benefited from Ms. Karen Halbrook's criminal activity will be investigated. That includes HOA-related accounts. The silence that followed was deafening. You could hear the air conditioning click on. He turned toward me and added, and to be clear, this man's cooperation was instrumental in stopping an organized criminal ring. He will not be punished. He will be commended. I felt dozens of eyes turn to me, and for the first time, I didn't feel invisible. I felt vindicated. Nancy sat down hard. Her face was the color of unripe tomatoes. The meeting ended without any votes, motions, or resolutions, just panic. And in that moment, I realized the truth. The hole wasn't just cracking, it was collapsing. By the next morning, the shift was palpable. Sagebrush Glade had changed. You could feel it in the way neighbors lingered on sidewalks in tense little huddles, speaking in whispers but stealing glances at the clubhouse. You could see it in the trash bins overflowing with shredded HOA newsletters and broken lawn signage. The illusion of control was gone, and with it, the power Nancy and her clique had clung to for years. And then came the resignations. First, it was Brent I-have-and-MB Tolliver, treasurer and Karen's lapdog during every budget dispute. Then Susan Miller, chair of the beautification committee, who once fined a widow for painting her fence beige instead of soft sand. One by one, they fell like dominoes. By Friday, 5 board members had stepped down. Nancy was still clinging to her post like a barnacle on a sinking ship, but even she looked more like a prisoner than a leader now. The community was in revolt. Lawn signs popped up overnight like weeds. Take back our block. No more paper tigers. Disband the HOA. And the once feared HOA Facebook group, it transformed into a war zone. People posted screenshots of emails from Karen, violations that now felt like harassment, and unapproved purchases made by the board. Someone leaked footage of Nancy yelling at a landscaper for planting non-native succulents. It got more likes than any HOA post ever had. That's when the petition surfaced. A group of residents by a retired schoolteacher named Alma and a motorcycle mechanic named Jay started a formal movement to dissolve the HOA entirely. Within 48 hours, they had over 70% of the neighborhood's signatures. Momentum like that couldn't be stopped. And through it all, I kept my head down until I got a knock on my door. It was Paul, Karen's husband. He looked like hell. Gaunt, sunken eyes, his polo shirt hanging off him like it belonged to someone else. In his hands, a large manila envelope. I don't want any trouble, he said quietly, but I thought maybe this could help. I took it, and sure whether to thank him or brace for another storm. Inside, gold, bank statements, internal HOA correspondence, reimbursements from the neighborhood's improvement fund signed off by Karen for things like community development consultations that were, in reality, spa packages and furniture orders. HOA funds used like her personal ATM. Paul muttered something about finding it while packing her things and then just walked away. Muffin trotted behind him, tail low, as if even the dog knew the weight of what had been uncovered. I forwarded everything to Agent Marks. His response came within an hour. You just nailed the coffin shut. Karen wasn't just facing theft charges. Now it was embezzlement. And the cherry on top, the FBI was moving to seize assets purchased with HOA funds. That meant refunds, restitution, justice. And for the first time since I'd bought my house in this sun-baked suburb, I thought, maybe we're going to be okay. Karen's trial became the event of the year, not just in Sagebrush Glade, but across the entire region. The courthouse overflowed with reporters, curious neighbors, and more than a few smug ex-HOA victims who had come for a front row seat to the reckoning. The same woman who once demanded I repaint my mailbox because it was too glossy now stood at the center of a criminal saga with enough charges to make a mob boss sweat. I sat near the back of the courtroom, trying to blend in, but people recognized me. Whispers followed me like shadows. That's the guy who helped the feds. One woman even brought me a muffin and said, "You saved this neighborhood." It felt surreal. I was just a guy who hated being pushed around. I didn't ask for any of this. And then she walked in. Karen. But she wasn't the HOA Karen we knew, clipboard-wielding tyrant in oversized sunglasses and crisp blouses. She looked small, frail. Her gray suit swallowed her frame. Her posture sagged like a crumpled umbrella. Her once piercing glare now flickered with desperation. The room went silent. The prosecutor wasted no time. They laid it all out like a hammer to the skull: theft of mail, wire fraud, money laundering, conspiracy, embezzlement. Screens showed the fake charity website, photos of stolen goods, footage of Karen hauling the bait packages during the sting. And then came the bombshell: the bank records, the transactions, the proof of HOA funds being funneled into shell accounts under her name. Her lawyer didn't stand a chance. When it was Karen's turn to speak, she gave a rambling, blame-soaked mess of a statement. She accused everyone, her neighbors, the FBI, even Paul, for isolating her and forcing her to cut corners. Her voice cracked as she tried to spin her crimes into misunderstandings, but it was too late. The judge didn't blink. 10 years, no parole. He cited the calculated nature of her crimes, her lack of remorse, and the betrayal of public trust. The gavel fell with a sharp crack that felt like thunder in the room. As she was led away, she turned toward the gallery. Her eyes met mine. For a moment, something flickered there: recognition, rage, or maybe just the last spark of the person she used to be. And then she was gone. Just like that. Karen Halbrook, once the queen of Sagebrush Glade, was now federal inmate for 4791 AZ. But while the sentence was satisfying, the damage she left behind still rippled through the community. There was no applause as the courtroom emptied. Just hushed conversation, stunned expressions, and one lingering, heavy truth. The tyrant was gone, but we were still picking up the pieces. The days that followed Karen's sentencing felt like watching a curtain fall in a long, bitter play. But instead of darkness, light poured in. The residents of Sagebrush Gladians locked behind regulation fences, and silence were finally breathing again. For the first time in years, people weren't afraid to wave at each other, knock on doors, or organize weekend potlucks. The invisible chain that Karen and her HOA cronies had wrapped around the neighborhood had snapped. 2 weeks after the trial, a vote was held. The result was overwhelming. The HOA was officially dissolved. It didn't come quietly, of course. Nancy had tried to mount a last-minute campaign to preserve community order, complete with one final email blast filled with passive-aggressive nonsense about property values and respectable conduct. But no one cared anymore. The trust was broken. Her name had become shorthand for denial, and her resignation came with all the dignity of a wet grocery bag. What came next was unexpected and beautiful. People gathered to celebrate. What started as a small barbecue in Alma's front yard turned into a full-blown block festival. Food trucks lined the streets. Kids ran wild with chalk and bubble wands. A local jazz trio set up on the corner. Someone brought out water balloons. I hadn't seen so much laughter on this street in years. Even old rivalries began to dissolve. Marcus and Tiffany, who once nearly came to blows over a disputed fence line, were now co-planning a community garden. Retired veterans started organizing neighborhood watch shifts without the oversight of a board. People shared tools, swapped stories, told jokes about Karen's Queen of Chaos reign like it was all just a bad sitcom rerun. But the real heartbreaker came at the new community bulletin board. It had replaced the spot where Karen once insisted on posting rule sheets, passive-aggressive reminders, and photos of violations she took herself. Now, the corkboard was covered in drawings from kids, invitations to block parties, and notes like, "Thanks to everyone who helped clean up the playground. Need help moving furniture? Call Jace. Free yoga in the park biomat." It was no longer a wall of fear. It had become a symbol of connection. Standing there, sipping cold lemonade, I caught myself grinning, not just because of the freedom, not just because justice had been served, but because somehow, against all odds, the ashes of Karen's chaos had fertilized something new, something better. Sagebrush Glade had been broken for a long time. We just didn't realize it until the structure collapsed. But now that we were free, we weren't just surviving, we're finally living. The final poetic twist came a month later, the public auction of Karen's foreclosed house. The once pristine stucco fortress, with its towering security cameras and aggressively manicured lawn, now stood faded and hollow. The yard had grown patchy, her infamous Fox Italian fountain was cracked and dry, and her prized neighborhood watch captain sign had been knocked sideways in a windstorm and never fixed. It was like the house itself had given up. Most people figured the property would be snatched up by a real estate investor or maybe turned into another rental. But on a whim out of curiosity, maybe out of SPK placed a bid. And I won. The rumors spread faster than wildfire. Did you hear? He bought Karen's house. Suddenly, I had the attention of the entire neighborhood. Some were amused. A few were suspicious. But most were quietly thrilled. They know I wouldn't waste the opportunity. And I didn't. The first thing I did was tear down the privacy fences Karen had erected to keep out the world. Then I ripped out that monstrosity of a fountain, which had cost the HOA thousands in misappropriated funds. It was gone within 2 days. In its place, I laid down fresh sod, planted native trees, and brought in contractors to reshape the entire space. I had a vision. The property that once symbolized fear, control, and obsessive micromanagement would become something the neighborhood actually needed, a dog park. We called it Karen's Canine Corner. The sign at the entrance was hand-carved from mesquite wood, cheerful and ironic in tone. Where tails wag and tyrants are forgotten. The whole community chipped in some donated benches, others built agility ramps, volunteers painted murals on the park's border walls. Someone even planted sunflowers around the perimeter, saying they wanted to drown out the memory of Karen's poison ivy vines. Opening day was electric. Dozens of families arrived with their dogs, Labradors, Dachshunds, mutts, purebreds. One neighbor even brought a parrot on a leash. Kids laughed, parents chatted, and the sound of barking echoed down streets that once echoed with Karen's complaints about illegal wind chimes. And there, tearing across the field with a pink frisbee in his mouth, was Muffin. After Karen's sentencing, he had been adopted by a retired couple on the east end of the neighborhood. They gave him belly rubs, homemade treats, and long walks. Watching him chase tennis balls through the park that once belonged to the woman who leashed him to her obsessions was the most poetic justice of all. As I sat on a bench, watching dogs romp and people smile, I realized something powerful. Control had built walls, but community tore them down. And in their place, something beautiful had taken root. Months after Karen's downfall, Sagebrush Glade no longer resembled the brittle, fearful place it had been under her reign. It was like someone had cracked open a window and let in fresh air after years of suffocating in a sealed, stale room. I sat on the same porch where, almost a year ago, I had watched those strange packages or the packages that triggered a storm none of us could have predicted. Now, the evening sun painted the sky in streaks of gold and burnt orange. Children raced by on scooters. Neighbors strolled past laughing, sharing food, gossiping about normal things, not citations, not fines, not petty surveillance. Just life. The bulletin board by the clubhouse was overflowing with cheerful flyers. Game nights, volunteer drives, potlucks. Every weekend brought a new gathering. We had community gardens, a tool lending shed, and even yoga in the park every Saturday morning, hosted by Alma and her ragtag crew of retirees. Sagebrush Glade wasn't perfect. It was messy, it was loud, but it was alive. And most importantly, it was ours. Sometimes, when the breeze was just right, I could hear the playful barking from Karen's Canine Corner. I often wandered by, watching the dogs tumble and chase each other under the mesquite trees. There was no better symbol of our new chapter than that park born from the ruins of control and mistrust. As for me, life was simpler now. No more robocalls from the HOA. No more nasty letters about mailbox color shades. No more veiled threats about community standards. I had even fixed up my house the way I wanted, painted it a vibrant desert turquoise, built a handmade swing under the big oak tree, planted wildflowers along the walkway, no longer worrying about approved landscaping guidelines. Sometimes people still stop to thank me. Alma called me the spark that lit the fire. Jace said I should run for mayor. I laughed at the thought. I wasn't a hero. I was just a guy who got fed up at the right time. And Karen, she faded into legend. The stories grew wilder every time they were retold. Some said she tried to plead insanity. Others claimed she was writing a memoir from her prison cell. Most people just shook their heads and moved on, finally free to build something better without her shadow looming over every decision. As the stars blinked into the deepening sky, I leaned back in my porch chair, a cool drink sweating in my hand, and let out a long, slow breath. Not every story gets a happy ending, but some of the mess you get a second chance. A neighborhood reborn, a tyrant defeated, a community reclaimed, and peace real, hard-earned peace finally settling in like an old friend coming home. The winds shifted, rustling the wildflowers at my feet. I smiled into the warm dessert night. Content at last. True community isn't built through control, fear, or rigid rules. It thrives through trust, connection, and shared resilience. When one person seeks power over others through manipulation or intimidation, it can poison an entire neighborhood, workplace, or organization. But when people come together standing up against injustice, supporting one another, and reclaiming their voice, they can transform even the most broken place into something stronger and more beautiful than before. Sometimes it takes enduring chaos to uncover hidden strength. Sometimes it takes standing firm against corruption, even when it's uncomfortable, to create the kind of world you want to live in. The downfall of tyrants is inevitable, but the rise of community, that's something we build, day by day, choice by choice together.